Hello and welcome back. We're going to do one of the last steps in our Christmas toy box project. The toy box we've already done and personalized by showing you how to create an inset panel that has train on it, or a picture of a locomotive, a train. This one is going to be a little bit different. It's inspired by Wayne Mack. He does a toy box with a panel that has this sculptured or textured background look. So I thought I'd experiment for a few minutes and see if I could figure out how to do it. So I think it turned out pretty nice. So what I'm going to do is close this page and we're going to open up another. Okay, the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to close this file. So I've created one that's 24 by 10 1/4 by 3/4 inch thick. Up here on the top, you can see I'm doing a single-sided project. As usual, when I'm using my vacuum system to hold things down, my machine bed is the Z0 point. My datum point is my usual in the bottom left-hand corner on the screen, which is if I'm standing looking down the machine, it's actually the closest right-hand corner of the part. So the first step I need to do is I have to create my actual panel. So we'll create a panel that is 20.6. Looks like it's left over from the last one. So it's 20.6 and 9.2. That's what the drawing I'm going to do. Now this has radius corners because I use a router bit to cut the inset that it goes into. The radius corners are a 1/2 inch radius. So all those are put together. Now I can simply hit create. So I had my anchor point in the middle here, so it put it in the middle of the part. So that's the first step. We'll close this out here. Now we need some other lines to work with. So I'm going to do an offset mode here, or an offset, and I'm going to go outwards about 150 thousandths, 0.15. And then I'm going to create another offset. So this is the actual panel. This is my overcut. We'll show you this in a minute. But what I want to go inside is, where does this window start for my texture? And that's inset about 450. So I'm going to go to an offset inward and put 0.45. And there I am, I'm good to go. Okay, now the next thing I need to do is put my text in there. That's going to fit inside this box. And so I'm going to go over to my text. And you can pick whatever font you want for this sort of thing. I'm going to click right over here where I want my text. Actually, I'm not going to do that. I'm going to click the box. Because what I want to do is I want to create a text in that box. I could type it, then stretch it, but I'm going to make it fit in here or let the system put it in there. And I'm going to use a Times New Roman font for this. So that fits that nicely into this space. Now they have their own rules about the margins and how much space is around that. So I want to have my text slightly bigger than that. So I am going to then drag this a little bit, and I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to select the boundary that I want to put it in, and I'm going to come down to the align to a selection and put it in there. Now I'm looking at that and saying, I think that's going to be just about right. So I'm going to be good with that. This is all basically your artistic interpretation of what you want to do. So play around with the fonts and the spacings and do whatever you want to do. You can also take this, and we're going to do this in a minute. So this is all one piece, or all one vector. Not really, but it is one vector. So if I right click on this, and I can come down here and convert it to individual vectors. Now the T is different. And now I can play around with this as I like. I can play around with spacing. I can decide that I don't like this spacing. Or I can decide I want to take this T and I want to exaggerate the T by oversizing that. And then I could make this fit any way I want. So play around with some of these tools and have a little fun with that. I'm going to go up and just undo some of the things I've just done. So essentially we are ready to start writing code. All the design part of it's done. We'll go over to the right, the tool paths, and let's start by doing the texture part. So my texture is going to fit between here and each one of the letters. One of the reasons I broke this in to different pieces or small vectors or individual vectors is so I could decide where the texturing is going to be. It's going to go anywhere between this line and this line, or anywhere between this space here. So let's go to our texturing tool, which is right here. So we've got a bunch of different parameters that you can set up. I'm going to use a 3/8 ball nose to cut this. My start depth, where do I want it to begin, is going to be 0.2, and then the actual texturing is not going to be very much contrast. It's going to be between about 3/16 and about 1/8, so about a 1/16 of an inch deep. Now I played around with this when I was working on it last, and played around with the maximum cut length. The longer this cut length is, the faster this cuts. The more little tiny pecks it has to make, the slower it's going to go. So I came up with a compromise of my max length, my depths, and I would strongly suggest you play around with this. This is the thing that really makes the most difference, is my boundary vector offset. So as this comes in and hacks out little materials and gives me that textured look, I don't want it to overlap onto these letters. And I don't need it out here because this is going to be the rabbit that fits into the inset panel. So I'm going to play around with this. Now I'm just going to show you what this is going to look like, 0.15. And we're going to calculate that. Okay. And we're going to preview that. Now, that's not a terrible look. I don't like the little choppy edges here. So I can play around with the texture, and I can do a couple other things as well. I'm going to go back to my 2D view, and I'm going to do something that I should have done earlier. I'm going to click on these. My bit is 375 wide. If I want to cut right along the edge and make a nice radius edge, the transition from the scalloping to this, I can do an offset outward of 0.1875. Okay, to make my offset here, I need to go on the inside the same amount. So now I've got some new vectors. I like to go and create layers so I don't get myself confused. I'm getting a lot of lines on the sheet right now, or on the screen right now. So if I right click on that and come down to move to, I can move it to a new layer. I'll create a new layer while I'm doing that. And I'm going to call this text outline. Let's give it a different color. Green will work. I can see that nicely. So yeah, I can see those are the vectors I have to choose if I want to just trace around the letters. Now I can decide how deep I want those to go. So let's come back over here and let's create another step. We've got a texture. Let's just create a toolpath, and we'll select a ball nose. I've already done that. Our cut depth, I'm going to stay with 0.2. And I've got my 375. I'm going to cut on the machine vectors. It's going to be, I'm not sure that makes it. Yeah, I do. I want to be on the line because I divided half the diameter. There you go. I like to ramp all of my cuts so it doesn't just plow straight in and then move. It gives me a smoother finish, a little bit less sanding, a little less problems. And you can do whatever you want here. I usually do about 2 inches. That slows it down a little bit, but it sure takes the load off the cutter. So I'm just going to call this text. I keep putting test. So that's going to be my text outline. And I'm going to select each of the green lines. And you can see we're going to overlap right here. We'll see what that looks like when we come back. We may have to do some nudging and make this work a little bit cleaner. So now what I've got is if I preview just that tool, that will trace around my letters and clean them up a little bit, but not enough. So I'm going to go back to my texture. That's why. So I'm going to go back to the text outline. And remember, my start depth for my scallop was at 0.2. So I want to make my cut depth a little deeper than that. So I'm going to go 350. These are dimensions that I probably should have made some notes so you don't have to watch me. So now you can see each one of those is nicely boldly cut, but we still have this little fuzzy edges. You can deal with the fuzzy edge by dealing with this boundary offset. So let's try what it looks like at 0.2. We'll recalculate that, and then we'll go back to the preview. We'll reset our preview and preview all of our tool paths. That went the wrong direction, didn't it? Oh, I didn't have 0.2. Why did that not stay with me? So I could play around with this a little bit, and till I'm happy with it, I'm going to go on to the next step. So what I want to do is go back to my 2D view, and this is where I want to cut into the material, but I want to have a nice transition between this and my texture, and I already have the 3/8 bit in there with doing the text outline and the texture. So I'm going to do another tool path that goes on that line, and I want it to be 0.375 deep. That's how deep the rabbit is going to be. So I want it to come from a flat rabbit and then smoothly transition into the texture. So I'm going to say that I'm going to round. So we'll just round the border edge because we'll be on it with the ball nose. Let's have a look at what that looks like when we calculate it. So when I preview that tool path, there you go. Now this is all going to be cut away with the rabbit cuts, which we're going to do next. So I'm going to go back here, use the same line, but I'm going to go, in this case, I'm going to select a different tool. I'm going to go outside of the line. I'm going to select my 1/2 inch. I'm going to use a 1/2 inch compression bit, but I'm going to use my 1/2 inch straight end mill or straight bit. And I'm going to do the inside of the rabbit cut. 0.375. We will also ramp that, calculate that. Let's preview what that looks like. So now you see that nice radius transition, and this is going to be behind the panel in that rabbit. But I need to clean up the next part of it. I want to do the same thing here. So I'm going to use a little tool called duplicate because everything's going to be the same except the name and the vector that we choose. So we're going to choose this vector, and we're going to say this is the rabbit or rebate outside cut. And we will calculate that, and we'll reset the preview and preview all of those. I'm liking that a lot. I'm going to do one little tweak before we've got a problem up here. So let's go back to the outside cut. I know what I did wrong. I didn't change this to inside. So it should have been inside of that line. We'll reset the preview and preview all of our tool paths. I was thinking ahead to this next thing. I'm going to try and soften this transition between the letters by making it a little less deep. So I'm going to go 275 and calculate that. And I'm going to preview all my tool paths. I should have reset it first, sorry. I'm going to do it one more time because we're just learning here. There is no right or wrong here. 0.225. Let's make it pretty dramatic. Okay, we're getting kind of too closer to the look, but see if I zoom in. We've got a little bit of a jagged edge from the texturing. So I can play around with my texture boundaries. Again, I could make those a little bit bigger, but you can see that by just tweaking one of the two things, you can get a nice transition in there, the look you're going for. Okay. All I have to do to make this ready to go run on the machine is grab this vector here, or to install it in my toy box, run on the machine, and then install in the toy box. We'll grab this vector. This is the outside edge. So I'm going to take my 1/4 inch compression bit, and I'm going to cut through the material. Now the rabbit is already 375 deep, and I'm going to go 385. So I go 10 thousandths through the material. So we're going to cut the outer profile. Now we've got, throw the waste away, we've got a panel with a nice flat edge to go into the rebate on the back of the inside panel. We'll have toys coming through. We could put a nice coat of paint on this. It's going to look great. This is part of our Christmas gift exchange. Now, we're not exchanging literal gifts. We're exchanging our plans, the things that we're building for our family or friends for Christmas. This toy box plan was contributed to the project by Wayne Mack from Essex in England, from Canby Island, actually. And so he was willing to let us share this set of plans with anybody who shares their plans. So it's an exchange, a literal exchange of plans. We're going to do this for the next couple of weeks. And anybody who wants to participate, I don't care if it's a big project like this toy box or if it's a candlestick or coasters to, put on the table to protect your table. Whatever you've created and whatever you're going to give away as gifts, and you feel comfortable sharing it with the rest of our legacy community, then please get a hold of us, send us your email. We'll exchange with you all of the plans that are contributed. So if we have 10 people, great. If we have 100 people, well, then you're going to have a lot of fun projects to pick from when you think about what you're going to do for Christmas. So I just want to wish you the best of the season. It's just a few days before Thanksgiving right now. So the best of the season to everyone, and happy woodworking and happy holidays.